Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit, the podcast that takes, those really dense academic papers and makes them surprisingly interesting. I'm Pavlov.
And I'm Nikita.
We've noticed a lot of you are tuning in, which is amazing, but I haven't quite hit that subscribe button yet.
Yeah, and that little button, honestly, it's so small, but it makes such a huge difference in helping us reach more people with these important discussions.
Right. It's true. Like the algorithms, those mysterious forces that decide what we all see and hear, they pay a lot of attention to subscriber numbers.
Yeah, think of it like the subscribing. It's like casting a vote for quality content, So these insightful research discussions don't just get lost in the sea of all the information out there.
More subscribers equals more visibility. Right. And that means more resources for us to make even deeper dives for you.
Yeah.
Maybe bring in experts for interviews, even do some live Q&A sessions where you can jump in.
Yeah, exactly. It's all about building a community around research,
Yeah.
where curiosity thrives and knowledge is like shared and debated. Today we're tackling a topic that you might not have thought about much before, like what happens to a company when the CEO suddenly dies, especially if it's a smaller business.
Yeah, it's something that a lot of businesses unfortunately have to deal with, and the impact can be pretty huge.
For sure. And we're going to break it all down for you today based on a 2025 study. And get this, it's from the Journal of Management Studies.
Okay.
The King is Dead, Long Live Who? A family and firm embeddedness perspective on succession after the CEO owner's sudden death.
Wow, that's quite a title.
It's a mouthful, right?
Yeah, it is. But it really gets to that core question of who takes over and what actually helps them recover when something like this happens.
Exactly. And this particular study, they looked at privately held companies in Sweden over a 5-year period after the CEO died. And get this, the study actually found that the most successful successors were often family members who had also been working in the company. Like they had a lot of experience.
So it's not just about, family ties or being a familiar face. It's really about having that deep knowledge of how the company works from the inside.
Right. So imagine you have a small business owner and they pass away suddenly. It's almost like you're pulling this essential thread out of a piece of fabric. It all starts to unravel. The study calls this disembedding, and it can really leave a company vulnerable.
Think about like a local bakery, where the owner was so involved. They knew all the recipes, they managed the suppliers, they had those personal relationships with all the customers. When they're gone, suddenly it leaves this massive hole.
Totally. And then on top of that, you've got the emotional impact of that loss. It's just a lot for anyone to deal with. The study actually found that sales can plummet like 60% and employment drops by 17% in the years after a CEO dies.
Yeah, those numbers are really stark. It really highlights why having a plan in place for something like this, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises that depend so heavily on their CEO, is absolutely critical.
So let's talk about who steps into those shoes. This study really zeroed in on two main things: family embeddedness and firm embeddedness.
Right, so family embeddedness, that basically means is the new successor related to the CEO who passed away, and then firm embeddedness that looks at their experience inside the company. How long have they been there? Do they understand how everything works?
Gotcha. So you've got the family member who might inherit the business, and then you've got that longtime employee who knows all the ins and outs. So which one is better suited to actually lead the company through a difficult time like this?
Well, it's not quite that straightforward. The studies show there's a lot of nuance here. Let's start with those family successors. They often have to deal with a really tough emotional situation. It's like grieving a loss while also having to make major business decisions.
Yeah, you've got that personal connection that adds a whole other layer to it.
Absolutely. And the study even quoted one widow who took over her husband's company. She said she did it to prevent a double loss. Can you imagine the weight of that responsibility?
Yeah, it's incredibly powerful, and you can really see how those mixed emotions come into play. It must be so difficult to separate grief from what's best for the business.
Exactly. And what the study found was that, at least in the short term, family successors can actually have a harder time than those who aren't family. They're trying to process all those feelings while also dealing with all the business challenges.
So it's not always an easy transition. But what happens over time? Does that emotional connection ultimately help or hurt the company?
That's where it gets really interesting. The study found that over the long haul, family successors often have this incredible drive to rebuild. It's like becomes a personal mission, almost like a tribute to the CEO who passed away. And that dedication can actually lead to a stronger recovery for the company in the long run.
So it's not just about riding out the storm. It's about having that long-term vision that's tied to this deep connection to the company and its legacy.
Yeah, exactly. It challenges the assumption that family getting involved could hurt a company in a crisis. In fact, it shows how those family ties can be a source of real strength and resilience.
Yeah. This is fascinating. We've only just scratched the surface. Clearly, family is a big factor, but it's not the whole story. So what about that firm embeddedness? How does all that experience inside the company make a difference?
Well, the study showed that those internal successors with a lot of experience, they actually have an advantage in both the short term and the long term. They can step in and provide that stability right away because they know the operations, they know the culture. They already have those relationships with clients and suppliers.
Right. It makes sense that someone who's been there wouldn't need as much time to get up to speed, especially during a crisis. That could be a huge help.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is that this experience comes into play even years down the road. They're able to tap into something called organizational memory. They've seen what's worked and maybe even more importantly, what hasn't worked in the past. That kind of knowledge is invaluable when you're making decisions about the company's future.
Yeah. It's like they've got this built-in knowledge bank. They've lived through the ups and downs of the company, which gives them a unique perspective on how to handle those future challenges.
You got it. And this leads us to one of the most surprising findings from the study. They found that the absolute best case scenario for a company after, losing a CEO suddenly is to have a successor who has both of those things. So a family member, but someone who's also been really involved in the company for a long time.
So it's not an either, it's having both.
Exactly. And here's the thing, what's even more interesting is that family successors who don't have that experience in the company, they actually tend to do the worst. They see higher rates of financial problems even compared to someone coming in from completely outside the family.
That is surprising. So just being part of the family isn't enough. In fact, it could even be a disadvantage if they don't really understand the business.
Yeah. Exactly. The study actually suggests that maybe in those cases, family members should think twice about taking over right away if they don't have the experience. It might be better for the company to have someone who's more seasoned at the helm, at least, to get through that initial crisis, even if they aren't related.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's about putting the company first, even when things are really emotional. So if we're putting all this together, it seems like the ideal successor is someone who really gets how the company works, can make tough decisions, but is also deeply invested in the company's future, almost like a guardian of its legacy.
You said it perfectly. It's about striking that balance between that need for stability right away, but also having that long-term vision, that commitment to helping the company not just survive, but actually do well.
It's a lot to think about, and I'm already thinking about my own network, like, who would I go to for guidance if I was suddenly in charge after something like this happened? What kind of experience would I even need?
And that's a really important question for anyone who's in a leadership role or wants to be one someday. Think about the people you really trust, the ones with that knowledge and those skills who could help you through a really challenging time. And for everyone listening out there, think about who comes to mind for you.
And it's not even just about knowing who those people are. It's about building those relationships now before a crisis happens. Cultivating that trust and open communication so that when you really need it, that support system is already there.
For sure. It's about being proactive with those relationships.
Yeah.
Identifying individuals with different skills, different perspectives, and fostering a way to really work together openly.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, whether you're leading a team right now or working towards a leadership role? I think this deep dive has some really valuable takeaways.
It shows us how important it is to plan for succession even in smaller companies. Having a plan, even for the unexpected, can make all the difference between a company going under and bouncing back.
And it's not enough to just have a name on paper. You've got to actually prepare those potential successors. Give them real opportunities to learn and grow within the company.
Exactly. Like mentoring, shadowing, maybe gradually giving them more responsibilities. It's like creating a pipeline of future leaders so that when the time comes, someone is ready to step up with confidence.
And if you're not in a leadership role yet, think about your own experiences in your network. Who are the people you could be learning from right now?
What are those skills and that knowledge you need to develop to be ready for bigger roles down the line? Being proactive, seeking out those growth opportunities and building those relationships, that's how you set yourself up for success in your leadership journey.
And even beyond leadership, think about the people you rely on when things get tough. Are those connections strong? Is there real trust there? Because building those things ahead of time can make all the difference when you face a challenge.
And remember, even when you're dealing with loss and uncertainty, there's always potential for resilience and growth.
Knowing what factors can contribute to that success, I think that's so valuable for everyone, no matter what role you're in or what industry you're in.
It's almost like looking at these difficult situations, not as failures, but as chances to change, to reinvent and come out stronger on the other side.
This study gives us a framework, a way to understand those changes and make better decisions about leadership, both when things are tough and in the long run.
We've seen that a CEO dying suddenly can have a huge impact, especially for small and medium businesses. But it doesn't automatically mean the end for the company.
It really changes how we think about family businesses, doesn't it?
Absolutely. There's this idea out there that family businesses are just more fragile, more likely to make decisions based on emotion, and more likely to have conflict. But what this study really shows is that when you combine those family ties with a good understanding of the business, that can be a real source of strength, especially when things are hard.
So it's not about pretending those emotions don't exist. It's about recognizing them and channeling them into that drive to rebuild and honor what the company stands for. It's really powerful.
And it brings us back to that key. Finding the perfect successor is someone who has both the head and the heart. They can make those strategic decisions while also understanding what the business means on a personal level, especially for family members who've put their lives into it.
Going back to that bakery example, imagine if the owner's child had also learned the business side by side with them. They'd be bringing that passion for the recipes and the customers, but also the knowledge to keep things running smoothly.
It's about finding that balance, not just bloodline, not just experience, but that powerful combination of both.
This whole deep dive has been packed with great information. We've challenged some of those common assumptions and hopefully given you all a lot to think about, whether you're running a business or just part of a team.
We've learned that a CEO dying unexpectedly can really shake things up, especially for those smaller companies. But it doesn't mean it's the end. The choice of who takes over is so important. And statistically, having that family connection paired with real experience in the company gives them the best chance of recovering.
It's about finding someone who understands the business and understands how serious the situation is, someone who can keep things going in the short term while also planning for the future.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with this. Imagine you were suddenly put in charge after a crisis. What strengths would you bring to the table? What experiences and relationships would you lean on to get through that tough time?
Really take a moment to think about that. Think about your network, the people you trust, your mentors, and think about the skills and knowledge you still need to develop to be ready for whatever challenges come your way.
Because in the end, it's not just about surviving. It's about using those difficult moments to come out stronger, more resilient, and ready for what's next.
And that really says something about what we're capable of as humans. Our ability to adapt, to find new ways to do things, and overcome even the toughest obstacles.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time. Keep learning, keep growing, and keep building those important connections.
It really changes how we think about family businesses, doesn't it?
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
We often hear that family businesses are more fragile, that they might make decisions based on emotion, and that maybe there's more potential for conflict. But this study really highlights how when you have those family ties and you combine that with a good understanding of the business, that can be a real strength, especially when you're facing a crisis.
Right. It's not about pretending those emotions aren't there. It's about acknowledging them and then using them, channeling them into this drive to rebuild and honor what the company stands for. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And it brings us right back to that key point. The best successor has both the head and the heart. They can think strategically, make those tough decisions, but they also get what the business means to people on a personal level, especially for family members who've, dedicated so much to it.
If we think back to that bakery example, imagine if the owner's son or daughter had also been learning the business, working alongside them. They'd have that passion for the recipes and the customers, but they'd also have the skills to keep everything running.
It's like finding that perfect balance.
Yeah.
It's not just family, it's not just experience, it's both together.
This deep dive has been full of insights. We've definitely challenged some assumptions and hopefully given everyone a lot to think about, whether you're running a company or just part of a team.
Yeah, we've learned that when a CEO dies suddenly, it can have a huge impact, especially for small and medium businesses. But it's not always the end. The choice of who takes over is really important. and having that family connection along with experience in the company that gives them the best chance of recovering.
It's about finding someone who gets it. They understand the business, but they also understand how serious the situation is. They can keep things going, but they're also thinking about the future.
So as we wrap up here, we want to leave you with this. Imagine that you were suddenly in charge after a crisis. What would your strengths be? What experiences would you draw on? What relationships would you turn to?
Take a minute to really think about that. Who's in your network? Who do you trust? Who are your mentors? And what skills and knowledge do you maybe still need to work on to be ready for those challenges that might come up?
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about making it through. It's about using those difficult times to become stronger, more resilient, and more prepared for whatever comes next.
And that really shows, what we're capable of as humans. Our ability to adapt, to be creative, and to overcome even the hardest obstacles.
And don't forget to subscribe to Revise and Resubmit on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And if you're enjoying the show and want to support us in creating more insightful content, consider becoming a patron on Patreon. Every contribution helps us continue this journey of exploration and discovery. Until next time, keep those minds curious, keep questioning, and keep revising and resubmitting.